So, Halloween has passed. You probably enjoy this holiday, right? But did you know that just last Halloween, 8 people were killed in the USA? And do you know the name Ronald Clark O'Bryan? Remember it, because he committed the most terrible crime on this holiday. In this video, you will learn about him and other murders. Halloween is a holiday where people dress up in different costumes. In translation, Halloween means All Hallows' Eve, as it is celebrated on the Eve of All Saints' Day, October 31st. So, in 1992, 16-year-old Japanese student Yoshihiro Hattori came to the USA on a student exchange program. He lived in Louisiana, staying with a family. On October 17th of that year, the Japanese student and his American friend were invited to a Halloween party. It's worth noting the young man's costumes. Yoshihiro's friend had injured his neck shortly before the holiday, so he had to wear a medical brace, which he made part of his costume. The Japanese student was also wearing a costume for Halloween. The young man got the address of the party wrong. They simply mixed up a few numbers in the house number, leading them to the neighboring property. It was also decorated for the holiday, making the guys think that the event was happening there. They knocked on the front door, but no one opened it. Only a woman peeked out of the side window and, frightened, called her husband Rodney Pierce. A 30-year-old man working as a butcher in a local supermarket came out of the front door with a revolver. Yoshihiro Hattori tried to explain the situation, saying that he and his friend had come to a party, but Rodney didn't listen to him. He pointed his revolver at the 16-year-old student and ordered him to freeze. It's unclear whether the young man didn't hear or didn't fully understand, but he started moving towards the man. Rodney Pierce then shot the student. His American friend immediately ran to the neighbors to call for an ambulance, but unfortunately Hattori could not be saved. He died from blood loss on the way to the hospital. In his interrogation, Rodney said that he just wanted to protect his home from a possible burglar who had trespassed on his property. Initially, no case was opened against him. The man was simply sent home, but after the intervention of the governor and the Japanese consul, a criminal case was opened against him. The man was charged with involuntary manslaughter. In May 1993, a trial was held where the jury let him go. Naturally, the deceased's parents were outraged by this decision and continued to sue the murderer. Eventually, a year later, the man was obliged to pay about $600,000 to the victim's family. Hattori's parents directed the large sum to the creation of 2 charitable foundations. If the previous murder happened due to a misunderstanding, the next crime was committed intentionally. On October 30th, 1975, 15-year-old Martha Moxley did not return home right before Halloween. The next morning, her body was found, beaten with a golf club, near a tree not far from her home. The girl lived with her parents in Kentucky. Across from their family home was a neighboring house where the Skakel family lived. Martha was friends with 2 boys from that family, 17-year-old Thomas and 15-year-old Michael. The same golf club that killed Martha Moxley was found in the Skakel house. The last person to see the girl alive was 17-year-old Thomas. He became the main suspect in the murder, but according to forensic evidence, Martha's death occurred between 9:30 and 10 p.m. At this time, Thomas was at home watching TV with his tutor, and his younger brother Michael claimed that he said goodbye to his brother and the girl at 9:30 p.m. and went to his cousin's. In the end, they couldn't find the guilty party, but the Skakel family name was forever tarnished. In 1991, another suspect named William appeared in the murder case. He was accused of another crime, rape, in which, incidentally, the court acquitted him. It turned out that on that evening, William visited the Skakels' house, but his involvement in the murder was not confirmed. However, in the same year, Thomas and Michael's father decided to conduct an independent investigation to restore his family's name. 4 years later, there was a leak of materials. It turned out that both brothers gave false testimonies, and Michael became the main suspect in the murder. Another significant factor affecting the investigation was the discovery of Martha's diary. In it, she wrote that Thomas showed various signs of attention to her, which his brother Michael strongly disliked. In her diary, the girl noted that she needed to stop communicating with the Skakel family because Thomas's younger brother started threatening her. In 1998, a book by a detective from Los Angeles was published, listing numerous errors in the investigation of Martha Moxley's murder. He named Michael as the guilty party. In the same year, Martha's case was reopened, and 2 years later, Michael Skakel came to the police to confess. He admitted to killing the 15-year-old girl out of jealousy of his older brother. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole, but in 2013, Michael was released on bail due to hiring good lawyers, and in 2016, the case was closed altogether. In the end, the criminal was punished, though not as harshly as the law allows. But this is far from the most convoluted story. In 1957, the state of California was also not peaceful on Halloween. The doorbell rang at the home of successful entrepreneur, owner of 2 beauty salons, and World War II veteran Peter Fabiano. At the time, he and his wife had already gone to bed, and it was too late for children to be asking for treats. Peter woke up, got up, and went to the door, taking some candy with him. When he opened the door, he saw a woman in a mask. She raised her hand, which held a gun hidden in a bag. The stranger shot Peter in the chest and disappeared. The entrepreneur had a stepdaughter, who immediately ran to the neighbors and called an ambulance and the police. The investigation struggled to understand the murder's motives, and Peter's wife couldn't provide any testimony as she was in an incoherent state due to taking strong sedatives. 2 weeks later, John Rabel was arrested. This woman worked in the beauty salons owned by Peter and frequently visited their home. She had already been arrested for burglary and violating liquor laws. She was detained because the alibi she provided was not confirmed. About a month after the murder, someone informed the police about the location of the gun that was presumably used to kill Peter Fabiano. It was found in a storage locker at a grocery store. After the murder weapon was discovered, another woman, Goldine Pizer, came forward to the police and confessed to the murder. She was not acquainted with the Fabiano family or Peter personally, but was friends with John Rabel, who had been telling her bad things about Peter, such as his mistreatment of his wife and stepchildren. During one of their conversations, Rabel and Pizer agreed on the murder. They decided on the weapon to be used on the best time to commit the crime, after which John pointed out the future victim from a distance. On the fateful day, Goldine waited several hours in a car, deciding on the murder. But the story doesn't end there. The entrepreneur Peter had separated from his wife Betty at some point. She in turn was closely associated with John Rabel, and one of the conditions for reconciliation was the end of their relationship. This may have also influenced the woman's decision to commit murder. Eventually, Rabel and Pizer were arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. Getting a firearm in the US is relatively easy, leading to very scary consequences. In Texas, 3 people were killed. All were at a party in a small town where they argued with another man. The argument turned into a fistfight. At some point, the man pulled out a gun and shot the 3 assailants. All of them died from blood loss and gunshot wounds. The alleged criminal is still at large. On the same day, in Indianapolis, 1 woman was killed and 8 people were injured in a shooting during a large party. According to the police, all the victims were between 16 and 22 years old. Many firearms were found at the scene and several people were detained for questioning. Another murder occurred in Kansas. An armed man burst into a nightclub in Wichita, fired several shots and fled. The shooter has not yet been found. The incident resulted in 1 death and 2 injuries. In Florida, Halloween was also restless, with reports of 2 deaths and 18 injuries. A shootout also broke out there. In Louisiana, 6 teenagers were injured at a house party. All of them suffered gunshot wounds. And in Chicago, a shootout resulted in 25 people injured and 1 died. In total, during the Halloween holiday, 8 people were killed. About 100 were hospitalized with gunshot wounds, some in critical condition. This confirms the fact that America has significant problems with unrestricted access to firearms. On October 31, 1981, during the Halloween holiday, 17-year-old Maria Cialella asked her parents for permission to go out and promised to return by midnight. The last person to see her was a police officer around the same time. Eventually, her dismembered body was found a year and a half later, buried in the yard of Sally Biegenwald's house along with another body. 3 months earlier, Sally's son Richard had been arrested on suspicion of murdering another girl. It turned out that Richard Biegenwald had already been convicted of murder. He shot a grocery store owner. He had legal problems from early childhood, which was very difficult. As a result, at the age of 5, the boy tried to burn down his house. At 8, began drinking alcohol and gambling, and later was diagnosed with childhood schizophrenia, which led to his admission to a psychiatric hospital where Richard underwent 20 sessions of electroshock therapy. The young man's torture didn't end there, as after his release, he was readmitted to the hospital. There, he was twice tightly swaddled in a wet sheet, which when dried severely compressed the body. Ultimately, after all these procedures, at the age of 18, he killed an entrepreneur and was imprisoned. Richard was sentenced to life imprisonment, but after serving 17 years, he was released. There he began killing young girls, one of whom was Maria Cialella. In total, this psychopath killed at least 4 young girls and 1 drug dealer, and is suspected in 2 more cases. Richard Biegenwald was sentenced to death, but lawyers managed to save his life. In the end, he served 4 life sentences in prison and died in 2008 in the colony. On October 31, 2021, a real terrorist attack occurred in Tokyo. A 24-year-old Kata Hattori, dressed as the Joker, went on a rampage in the capital subway in Japan. In addition to this, he set fire to a train car. He injured 17 people, one of whom was in critical condition. But what led the young man to commit such a terrible crime? Kata Hattori told investigators that he lost his job and his relationships with friends completely fell apart. He fell into despair because he had no one close who could support and help him. In the end, he wanted to die, but in a special way. As Kata reported, he wanted to achieve the harshest possible verdict, the death penalty. For this, he planned to commit a terrorist act and kill several people. The first victim of the attack was a man sitting next to the criminal. Kata sprayed pesticide in his eyes and then stabbed him in the chest. Then he poured lighter fluid in the car and set it on fire. Then went on to create further chaos. Initially, train passengers thought it was some sort of show related to the holiday. Many simply filmed everything on their phones and didn't hurry to evacuate. The full danger of the situation was realized when they saw the bloody body and the criminal's knife. But even this terrorist act was not as terrible as the last crime in our episode. Who else but a 30-year-old ophthalmologist from Texas knows how to spoil a holiday? In mid-October, Ronald Clark O'Bryan visited a pharmacy to purchase potassium cyanide. This is an extremely toxic poison capable of easily killing a person. He was not satisfied with the weight and price of the product, so he left in search of a more suitable one. On Halloween, October 31, 1974, Ronald walked with his son Timothy, daughter, neighbor, and 3 other children. Traditionally, the children went to neighbors for candy. Before going to bed, Timothy ate one of the candies, after which he immediately became ill. He started vomiting violently. The boy died on the way to the hospital. The father claimed he knew nothing about the poison candy. The police immediately started looking for potentially poisonous products and found them with all the children who were out that day. Ronald was charged with capital murder and 4 attempted murders. He denied his guilt, but it turned out later that O'Bryan had insured his children's lives for tens of thousands of dollars with different insurance companies. He called one of the banks the next morning after Timothy's death. Ronald was bankrupt. With the insurance money received from the banks for his children's death, he planned to pay off his debts. Newspapers called the man the one who killed Halloween. At the trial, he continued to claim his innocence, but in June 1975, a jury found Ronald O'Bryan guilty of murdering his own son for profit and sentenced him to death by electric chair. The sentence was carried out in 1984. Today, you learned about the horrors that occurred. Thank you for watching.